Welcome to episode 32 of the Ready for More podcast.
The way that you get beyond the stagnation of LinkedIn is the engagement piece. Is your profile, are you engaging?
Welcome to the Ready for More podcast, where we share success strategies and stories for women business owners, entrepreneurs who are ready for more for yourself and for your business. I'm your host, Heather Cameron, and I'm here to help you to discover your unique path to profitability and success so you can achieve your more on your own terms. Are you ready for more? You can find today's show notes and links at www.igniteyourmarket.com/readyformore. Welcome to the Ready for More podcast. My guest today is Kelly Leonard. Kelly is an author, keynote speaker, consultant, trainer, podcast host, and award-winning CEO who has successfully helped thousands of business leaders increase revenue, build profitable strategic partners, connect with new clients, land dream jobs, and more. Kelly is the CEO of Taylor Leonard Corporation, T-LC. Working closely with her husband, Kelly has held leadership positions with GE Capital, Kaiser Permanente, and PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you so much for being one of my guests. I'm really excited to share your story and to learn from you as well.
Thank you so much, Heather.
So that was your bio. Can you tell me a little bit more about what your current business is and what you're doing?
Absolutely. So our company, we're based just outside of Washington, D.C. in the suburbs. We are a training, business development, and information technology consultancy. My husband actually started the company back in 2006. His background is technology. So when he started the company, we were a boutique CRM, customer relationship management firm. My background is actually, interestingly enough, accounting. I'm a non-practicing CPA, so certified public accountant. When I came on board with the company in 2010, because I don't have a technology background, my background by and large when I was at GE Capital and Kaiser Permanente and PricewaterhouseCoopers even really focused on training, so corporate training. So given my corporate training background, we started pivoting the company a bit to really develop in that whole training and business development space.
Excellent. I actually have an engineering background, so I have an engineering technical background like your husband, but I migrated and loved the corporate training start, which is what my first part of my business when I went on my own was leadership development and team building.
Nice.
First, and then I moved into the coaching as a secondary part in 2009, 2010, but started with doing leadership development. So I love your area of work. That's why I'm curious. I love being. How is it? So it's very different and going into business with an established business. A lot of the people that I talk to start their business from themselves and then they grow. But I'd love to know what it was like to go from that corporate business to working in a business that your husband established.
It's interesting. So part of, we were just discussing just the other night, the friction that resulted when I came aboard with the company, because it was sort of, my husband had birthed a baby that he was really proud of because that was his area of technical expertise and continues to have a passion for technology. So when I came aboard, there was some friction in that it's like, well, I'm not a technologist, so don't try to turn me into something that I'm not, because that's going to really cause not only friction in the business, but friction in the relationship. And so even navigating that whole part as a couple in business was interesting, and coming to terms and to agreement to the fact of understanding that we each have very unique talents and gifts and abilities, honoring those talents, gifts, and abilities, and allowing me to create my own identity inside of the company. And recognizing that, that whole notion of 1 + 1 = 3 really is true, because now you've got two unique individuals that are coming together who bring really neat, creative, innovative ideas and information on their own, but then to bring that together was really cool. I mean, I think as I reflect on the transition from traditional corporate into entrepreneurship, I think the biggest challenge for me and for us as a family was this whole notion of, okay, here in the States at least, I was getting paid the 15th and the 30th like clockwork. And now all of a sudden, the ebbs and flows of cash flow, the roller coaster of it all, I think that was probably one of the biggest challenges that we faced.
And I think that's a huge challenge for so many people when you go from a corporate to a entrepreneurial space. It's just, it's the ebbs and flows of getting, and also the work to get your money. It's not, your paycheck doesn't automatically go in your account. You have to do receivables. You have to collect your money. You have to know how to get paid.
Right. Yeah. And not only that, the other thing that's interesting, Heather, is never had I ever, and maybe it was because I wasn't always on the front end of pricing in those organizations, I never knew of us approaching a client and the client saying, well, no, not this dollar, how about that dollar? And so as an entrepreneur, it's like, how many times do we have to face this conversation where we present people a proposal on our pricing and they try to change that whole dynamic where it's like, well, no, not that dollar, how about this dollar? And so even that whole developing new skills around negotiation and things like that was also quite interesting.
Absolutely. When in my corporate world, so I was an engineer and I had the privilege of working in Australia and a bunch of other places.
Oh, nice.
So when I went to Australia, I was working, and my boss at the time, I went on this huge contract, and one of the things I kept saying is I don't do pricing. So he actually made me a t-shirt saying, I don't do pricing. Because I did everything else. I did all the technical stuff. I designed it. I'm like, but I don't want to do pricing. In the end, I actually ended up doing pricing and became quite good at it. But it is very different. It's one of the things I think women entrepreneurs struggle a lot with. So is that not only asking for what you're worth, but then you bring up the point of negotiating what you're worth, and standing by it and saying, yeah, no, this is what I'm worth.
And being okay with walking away. I had a conversation just 2 weeks ago with someone who was like, oh, I'm really excited to get started. And I want to talk to you about lower pricing. And I'm thinking, what do you mean lower? I mean, the price is the price. And years ago, I would have negotiated and I would have given her a discount. But I quickly, through the years, have recognized the fact that when you start compromising on your pricing, it really sets you up for a less than fruitful relationship for both parties. Because, on the one side, you feel resentful as the service provider because you're thinking, okay, this person is getting way more of me than what they're paying for. And they typically end up being the most, like, the high maintenance clients. And it's like, okay, not only are you not paying me full price, but now you're taking up all my time and my energy. Like, why did I agree to this? And so I've just stopped. I'm like, no, price is the price from now on.
Absolutely. I had a situation when I first went out in business, and one of my clients was an NGO, non-government agency, who was doing work all over the world. And I got this call going, do you want to come with us to Africa and do a leadership development workshop? But we really need to negotiate the price. And I said, well, I'll go and I'll give you a day free as not in charge, to free as a development so that we can sell this together to multiple places. And I never downed my hourly rate. And I was so glad I did that, because they used to introduce me as, not only did I go that time, I went 3 more times to Africa. Wow. So I got paid my full rate everywhere. So giving them the day development was nothing. And they used to introduce me as Heather's expensive, but she's worth it.
Oh, nice.
And that's what you want, right? You want to be in that place where you're expensive, but you're worth it.
Absolutely.
And so, but it is one of the things I find many, many women are really struggling with.
Yeah.
Knowing how to price what they're worth and stand up to it. And there's a lot of, because I like what you said, there's a lot of games that go on. I see it a lot in the online business where if you sign up, you get 50% off for the first 10. And I personally have a hard time with that.
Yeah.
I don't have a hard time with saying, if you sign up and join my program, I'll give you a bonus, and I'll take the bonus away for people who didn't.
Right.
But I tried to do this price thing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it. I felt my own integrity wasn't there.
Yep. Absolutely. I agree.
Because to me, if you're selling something to 2 people and you're playing with the price just because they signed up, it was one of those ones that I couldn't. So I know lots of women struggle with this. A lot of women underprice themselves.
Yeah.
In their businesses, whether they're doing, selling into a corporation or selling to another business owner, you still deserve to be paid what you're worth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so one of the things, because I know for me, I just have a sort of a big heart. I always like to give. And I find as women, I think we're maybe created to be these nurturers. And so we want to give. And so what I ended up doing long ago, one of my coaches said, well, you know what, I know you have a big heart, but you got to manage that also. And so it used to be that I would give away so much information. And so he's like, well, why don't we negotiate? Why don't you be willing to speak twice a month at no cost, but make sure you're speaking in environments where your ideal buyer might be hanging out. So that then you feel good, you're giving something away because that's what you love to do, but it's a part of your marketing strategy as opposed to just this random give, and there's no real thought or theory or philosophy or strategy behind it.
I love that. I love that because I think one of the things that I've been delving into a lot and talking with my clients is that social media thing about giving. Everybody tells you have to do education. And I'm like, well, your education has to have a strategy to it. That was a mistake I made probably a year ago, was I did Facebook Lives, got on, did all that stuff, but I was never offering. I felt bad not offering because like you, I like to give, and then it should just magically know that you should hire me.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. So having a strategy around doing the free work and having a strategy to bring them to something that you offer, I think is brilliant.
Absolutely.
Is a brilliant learning. That's very cool. How is your business, like you've gone from the corporate world to working with your spouse and creating a business? How's it evolved since you took that step in? How has it grown and how has it evolved?
That's a great question because initially, because my husband Jerome had started the company, and we're a small, closely held company. And because the company represents, our name, so Taylor is actually my maiden name, Leonard, our married name, so Taylor Leonard Corporation. Initially, when we got started, because of the family brand and because Jerome started the company, he was sort of the voice and the image for the company. And then when I got started, so much of that started transitioning into, okay, this is Kelly's baby, so to speak, so much so that with our creation of the certain delivery, the products and services that we deliver, and because I do so much speaking and training, that it almost morphed into this, Kelly was the company. And so the challenge that I started running into was the fact that even though we have folks on our team who are quite capable of speaking and training and delivering and supporting our clients, people saw so much of me that they wanted to buy me and my expertise as opposed to just the strategy and the consulting, the methodology that we're able to bring to help them to boost their business success. And so that was a piece of the challenge, or the evolution has been that, okay, we've done a really good job of branding, but now it's like, now we have to even transition the thinking of a lot of folks to say, okay, yeah, we are a part of the brand. I am an individual brand, but inside of that is a much larger brand and methodology that anyone on our team can help you with. It doesn't just have to be, oh, well, we'll wait until you're available, Kelly, to come in and train our team. And so now we've started doing a lot more of leveraging online and technology to deliver self-paced, on-demand courses, so that now we're able to better scale some of what we've initially built.
That's really interesting, because it's one of those challenges, I think, especially if you're starting out on your own, whether you're working with someone or not, as to whether to brand yourself or brand your business. And it can be, I have a name that's really popular, so I could never really brand myself. It would have taken, I actually had my PayPal account put on hold because the ambassador to some country was Heather Cameron from Ottawa.
Wow.
So they actually put my pay, and they didn't tell me. They sent an email telling me I had to figure out this weird questionnaire, and it asked me if I was going to this country. I can't remember what country it was. So not having an original name really led me to having to brand outside of my name. But I know a lot of people struggle with that. Do you brand your business so that you can grow outside of yourself, or do you brand yourself?
Right. Yeah, and the other challenge becomes, because even with Taylor Leonard Corporation, we became, it's interesting. Initially, I used to always say, oh, I'm a control freak. But again, one of my coaches was like, no, you're protecting your brand. Because even as you start bringing people on board, it's making sure that they're maintaining the value and the work ethic and the standard that your company has set. Because there could be no worse thing happen than someone go out and misrepresent your company when your company is your family name. Because then it's just not a good look. So because of that, there were certain challenges even in our growth to, we are much more intentional and very protective of even who we bring on board and who we partner and team with, because of the fact that it's our name and we can't change our name.
No, that makes sense. I grew up in a family-owned business, a different world, plumbing, contracting, and heating, but it was run out of our home. So I know some of the dynamics you go through partnering with your spouse and all of that, because my mom and dad worked together. Our secretary or administration assistant secretary at the time was my aunt.
Wow.
And we had employees, right? So they had employees. So I grew up in that environment, and I was answering phones by the age of 13 or 14 because nobody would leave a message on an answering machine.
Mm-hmm.
People could believe that. Nobody would actually leave a message. So I was answering. And so I grew up in that environment, but that when your name, my father's name was on the trucks that were driving around the city, right? So his name was well known.
Yeah.
And probably went into many, many houses in the neighborhood, given the business that he did. But often people wanted to talk to him.
Yes.
Right. It was him, even though he had employees and other people answering. It was like they wanted him.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially in the work that you just described. I mean, when you've got people that are driving vehicles with the family's name on it, it's like, oh, that vehicle just cut me off. That wasn't very nice. And they don't know that, well, that wasn't actually my dad driving that vehicle. That was an employee, but still it's a reflection on us. Just like those of us that have children, even though our children grow up and they make their own decisions, it's still somehow, it's a reflection on us, even though it may not be our behaviors, and even though it may be contrary to the way that we raise them or instruct them.
And absolutely. And his employees were going into people's homes, right? So knowing that how you go into it and how you interact with the people and how you do that all reflects on your company. So so it's important when your name is there and your branding, trying to do that. So that's fascinating.
Absolutely.
How do you find the challenges of working with your spouse? Because I think that's some people, women entrepreneurs who go out, they join their spouse's company, or they decide they both going to create something together. How do you manage that challenge?
So it's fun. I mean, it's really interesting. And Jerome and I have a really unique relationship in that we're really good friends. And so there's this transparency, there's a lot of communication. We're both very type A, so, somewhat controlling, and we're both leaders, and we're both very focused and determined. And so it's interesting because I had to get really comfortable, and I would say actually both of us had to get really comfortable with knowing that we're on the same team always, and that feedback, constructive or seemingly not, however abrasive or, mean it may sound at the time that it's coming out of the other person's mouth, you always have to think back of, okay, but this person, we're on the same team. They want the best for me. They want the best for us. And I think as long as we've always had that as our foundation, it's been a really healthy encounter for the two of us. Now, it wasn't always that way. We had to grow into and mature into that awareness. But I think now we're in a place where we talk all the time. So we're texting back and forth. I mean, it's probably 15 to 20 times a day. We're on the phone multiple times a day. But we also have boundaries that we've set as well, which I think is a really important piece. I mean, we work hard, but we play hard. So, so many people, I think, when they are couples in business, there's this notion, and it's an interesting topic because we coach and mentor couples through our church, but then also through the work that we do, we work and coach a lot of couples that are in business together. And one of the reasons why we're so passionate about it is because oftentimes what you see is that you may have one couple or one part of the union who's really focused and honed in on business, and then the other person, typically perhaps the woman, who is more focused on home, and they don't feel connected to that business. And so part of what we coach and counsel our couples in is that both the spouses need to be engaged in the business at some level, even if it's just they're tuning into staff meetings, or they are just setting aside time each week where the other, the main person in the business is inviting that other person to be aware of what's going on inside of the business, just so that they feel a part of that enterprise. Because what we have found is when that doesn't happen, oftentimes the business becomes the mistress. So you've got, the leader in that business is so focused. I mean, all of their attention is focused on building up this enterprise, and it's at the expense of the family, the children, the spouse. Everyone's resentful because it's like, okay, yeah, you may be really super successful in your business, but you're failing as a parent or as a spouse. And so how do we invite the family into those conversations so that everyone feels a part of it? Everyone feels the ebbs and flows. Everyone can celebrate the highs and the successes and can empathize with the lows. Because again, I think far too often there's this disconnection, and then that's when you typically can't empathize or sympathize with what's going on either side of the equation.
Right. And it makes sense too, because your business is that when it's so integrated into your family. And I think back to my own growing up, and my dad's business was one of the unusual, because plumbing is an emergency-based business, right? So there's an emergency element into it that most businesses don't have. So to actually get away from it, my father inherited some money from his father, and they bought a cottage with no telephones at the time. So when you were away, you were away. No cell phones, no telephones, no pagers. We were away. And to give him that was really important, because otherwise he was breathing. And my mother was, because it was in our home, and my mother was quite involved. She was answering the phone, so she was constantly involved in the business. But we did have separation. I can't say that word, but was separate, right? And what they did is my parents got very active socially. By the time I was the youngest, by the time I was 13, they didn't need to be home with me. My brothers were there, so they had. And I think my parents were more sociable than we were. They were out almost every night doing something. And my mother was a driver for that. But it gave them time away from the business. Yes. It gave them an environment that was away from something that was always there. There was always, when it's in your basement, it's always kind of nagging you to go and do this. And even though it was plumbing and heating is an outside business, there's still all the working on the business that has to happen. There's the accounting and the paperwork and the billing. And my mom was the bookkeeper, and all that still has to happen.
Right.
And the return phone calls and that. So yeah, I can understand the importance of what I learned from my parents was the importance of carving that time out for themselves and our family.
Absolutely. And I think that's important work, even if your spouse isn't, like, even if you're a single person, a single woman who's building a business, is to have those times where you pull out, where you disconnect and just focus on yourself. And especially for those women that are solopreneurs, because God forbid, you don't take care of yourself, and then now you're sick and you can't, now your source of income is depleted. And so those times of quiet, whether it's meditative or recreational or just pulling out, is so important.
Absolutely. Definitely. And also I find I meet women whose spouses aren't in their business, and their spouses are still in the corporate world. And so they've decided that they're going out on their business of their own, and there's often a disconnect in understanding the worlds that we live in, similar to what you experienced of when you lost your paycheck and you actually had to go collect your money. The spouses don't necessarily understand that because they've never been through that.
Yeah.
And so having that supportive spouse who can help you understand and let them understand a little bit about what's going on and what it's like to be out on your own is part of educating your spouse, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I always laugh because when I talk to folks and they're like, oh, what's your biggest referral source? Who's your ideal, who provides you with lead? I'm like, my husband's my biggest referral.
That's pretty good. That's a great way to go.
Yes.
And that's what you want, right? It's that
absolutely
relationship. And it sounds like you guys have found the balance, which is not the easiest thing to find.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know about balance, and balance is, one of those words that we're all scratching our heads like, oh, we're constantly out of balance. We're used to imbalance is balance at this point.
The best word I ever heard for that, because I actually don't like the word work-life balance, because work is part of life. So why are we? Was resilience.
Yeah.
I love the concept of just having a resilient lifestyle where you have the ability to ebbs and flows and recognize what those ebbs and flows are.
Absolutely.
And again, when I apply that back to the way that I grew up, when my parents were very much that, because you didn't know when you had to walk out the door. You didn't know when we often had dinner without my dad sometimes. It was funny because when I went to school, I was initially, as a kid, were you supposed to give your phone number of your father's work? I'm like, I don't know it. It's on the truck that drives by. So there was not as many entrepreneurial families. I kind of felt weird. Like I felt like I didn't fit in because my family was different, and now I love what I had. But it's that funny comparison.
Right.
Of not knowing it. But resilience to me is the word that I think small business owners have to have, is that ability to be resilient and to move with it, as opposed to balance. Because balance, like you said, is an overused word. But it was someone when I took my coaching degree who used that word resilience, and I kind of like, that's much better.
Yeah, it is.
It's much better. What's been the most important lesson that you've learned on this journey from the corporate world to entrepreneurship to that?
The most important lesson. Yeah, I think it's valuing relationships, and never marginalizing the impact of a relationship. And so I think so much of it goes back to, as I look through the years, first of all, I just love people. People are my passion. They also drive me absolutely nutty.
I'm gonna say, you and I are on the same page in that one. They're my passion, but they drive me nuts too.
Yes. So yeah, and so I think that's a big part of it, has been a big part of it, is just staying connected and really focusing on building and maintaining relationships. And so, yeah, because as I look and I reflect on through the years, what has really fueled me have been the people in my life. So I just enjoy, it's interesting. I love being alone, but I also I love being around people. I love hearing their stories. I love trying to put the pieces of a puzzle together with a person to connect the right people, to help them solve problems. And so I think that's been the biggest, I guess, lesson, is just really building and maintaining strong relationships and the power of that.
You and I are kindred spirits in that, because when I left I was in high tech. I was in telecommunications and high tech, and I was in my last job with them was working in Australia. And then when I came back to Canada, the bubble had burst. Our company basically eventually folded. It was Nortel Networks. It's a big company, eventually folded. And I did a lot of soul searching about what I wanted to do next. And what I realized was that what turned my crank, what really got me excited, was to help somebody find their own potential. Mm-hmm. To watch someone go from being uncertain about what they wanted to do to finding their potential, and to watch them really shine at whatever it is they wanted to do. And that's why I switched from the high tech to leadership development. I went back to school and got a degree in adult education.
Wow.
And switched into doing that because it was just helping people rise up and work better together and doing that. So yeah, very similar.
Nice.
Yeah. So that was fun. What have you been the most surprised about?
The most surprised? That's a great question. What has surprised me the most? That's a tough one. I like the cattiness of people, I guess.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I guess that has surprised me the most. And the fact that, and I guess it's really from the perspective of the fact that so many people just take, and aren't really, it's like they're unashamed of it. Now, mind you, thank God, it's not the masses of the people that I come into contact with, but there are some that are out there that seem to just, and I guess maybe that's what surprises me, the fact that there's this unashamed desire to just take and consume and not be more willing to look at the value in being mutually engaged for the mutual benefit of both sides. So perhaps that has been a little bit surprising to me. But it's funny because I also, if I were a hard person, or like just I don't know, if I was in a different place personally and with my competence and confidence, I could see where that type of behavior would really negatively impact my desire to be a giver, because I would shut down and be like, well, forget about it. Like I've come across too many people who just take and aren't givers. But I'm reminded of, and I'm a woman of faith, and there's, scripture that says, we reap what we sow. And the thing that really one day in my quiet time when I was reading that and saying we reap what we sow, not where we sow. And so it was, I guess, assurance for me that I should continue doing what I do, and they're not the where, so it's like, it helped me to say, you know what, don't change my desire to give and to serve and to love and all these other things just because I'm not receiving that from certain people, because I'm going to continue reaping in a much larger, broader sense what I sow, which is love and service and giving and all these other things.
That's wonderful. It brings to mind a couple of things for me. I was at a networking meeting this week on Wednesday. We were talking about how, and it was a group of women entrepreneurs, and we talked about how women can rise themselves up, but women can take themselves down.
Gosh.
And it was that, and part of the feedback of this, it's a networking meeting that I host, and it's part of the feedback was this was so engaging and so inclusive, and it's like, thank you. But I've seen women get together, and I don't see this with men because I work primarily in a male environment up until I went to self-employed. But women can get really catty and they can take each other down. And it's surprising. When I see it happen, it always surprises me because it can be in the most best intentional group of women, and then just one person starts and that happens. And it really always surprises me. It always it reminds me of my mother. If you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. It's one of those things.
Absolutely.
And the other, I had a lesson learned because I had a client who encroached, and it comes back to your earlier conversation about price and value and that stuff. She just tended to encroach on my time, and I wasn't pushing back enough. And she was a great client, really made a lot, but she ended up with financial problems and ended up attacking me and really going to this point, and I took too much of it in. If hindsight could be 20/20, I go back and pull that out and say that was her problem, not my problem.
Right.
So I took too much of it in, and it really did bring me down for a bit. And it was a real lesson learned of that's their problem. So I recently had a client who I tried not to hire. I tried not to let me hire her, and then I knew I could help her, and she was so persistent. And after our first engagement, she just got way too demanding, and I said no. Like, it was at a time in life, my father was in the hospital, he passed away, and she was being really demanding, and I'm like, no. And I gave her back all her money, and I said, no, thank you.
Wow.
Right? Because that sense of not thinking of the other person and not being
But
part of it.
I applaud you for having the strength to do that, because that's not but I think it all goes back to, again, this whole notion of, if you have a scarcity mentality, you are fearful, and you'll compromise what you know to be what's true and what's right for you specifically. And so you'll allow people to dishonor you, or discredit you just for the sake of, well, at least I got paid. And it's like, but what else?
And we've all been there. It was kind of why I took her on in the first place. I mean, I tried not to, and then she kept insisting. And I'm like, well, okay, you're going to pay me, I'll do it. What's been your biggest challenge?
Biggest challenge, personally or business?
Either one. Business, personally.
Well, I think the biggest challenge has been scale. And again, I think it goes back to something that I alluded to previously, is just scaling in a way that still honors, scaling in a way so that we're thoughtful in who we bring on board, but then not allowing it to paralyze us. Because by nature, I think I had said already, I'm a certified public accountant by nature. So by nature, I'm rather conservative, and I'm risk adverse. And so for us, when we hire or when we partner or team with an organization, I'm dotting every I and crossing every T, almost to our own detriment, because of just the time and the meticulous nature of, I got to make sure that it's just right, that everything has to be perfect. And that also goes back to the scale piece, because not only is it the human capital, but then also there's this, for years I've been talking about, we're going to digitize our training curriculum and put it online so that it's on demand and blah, blah, blah. But it had to just be so perfect, Heather. It's got to be this and that. And then I was reading last year, I can't remember who it was that has this quote where it's like, perfection is like the, I don't know, the antichrist to something, to like productivity or something like that. And so, and I started thinking to myself, I just got to rip the Band-Aid off. Like, I'm causing my own speed bump, and I have no reason to be, because 9 times out of 10, we know when we are like, when we've made a mistake or when something's not perfect. But most of our clients are like, oh my gosh, what you said about this was amazing. Or when you did that, it was, and half the time you're on like autopilot and you're like, I said that? Really? Okay. If I said it, go, that's good. Wow, that was wisdom. Look at me go. But I think, it's seeking perfection. So I guess to go back to your question, it's this whole notion that things just have to be perfect in order to advance.
I say that all the time to clients. I actually finally had a client who's launching a program. She launched it this week, and it was amazing to watch her strength that came out when she finally did it. But I mean, it was a long time in the making. And I kept saying to her, I said, there's somebody out there looking for your solution today. And if you don't put it out there today, that person is either going to get more in trouble. Hers is in a financial situation. She's helping people with budgets. They're going to get more in trouble. They're going to get more, or they're going to go somewhere else, right? Because they need their solution today. They don't need you to be perfect.
Yeah.
They don't need it to be wonderful. They need your help today.
Yeah.
And it's something, I am a perfectionist as well. In that sense, I want everything to be perfect. And I am a bit of a control freak, or whatever that word is. And I had someone ask me a long time ago in her career, when I was in the corporate career, when people gave me stuff to look at, he always said, make sure you know what they need, but is it good enough? Is it good enough for the audience? Is it going to get the message across? It's not going to be perfect, but is it good enough? Is it what needs to be done? It might not be your standard, but is it good enough? And that was a good question for me. But yeah, that letting go and allowing other people into your baby is always hard too, because this is your baby and you've created it. It's your name in your case. In my case, it's my baby.
Right.
It's hard to let some stuff go. And one of the things I always advise people in, like, especially solo entrepreneurs, and that is when you start bringing people in, don't let your voice go.
Yes.
Don't give them your voice. Give them the other stuff. Teach them how you do your work, whatever, but never give. I had one gentleman I know who gave up his voice on social media. He kind of hired somebody in the Philippines, and they posted, and you could tell right away it wasn't him, right? Because his voice was comical and really unique, and they were posting useful information on his topic, but it wasn't his voice.
I'm so glad you said that, because of the work that we do, oftentimes people will ask us, oh, well, can you take over our social media management? And I'm like, there's just no substitute. I'm like, you don't have anybody internal that I'm happy. I'll teach them to fish. I'll teach them all the best practices and strategy and all that good stuff. But yeah, you don't want me to do it, because in order for me to effectively communicate in your voice, by the time I interact with you and get a sense of what your voice is, you could have done it yourself, and it would be a heck of a lot less expensive. Yeah. So yeah, I feel you on that piece, but so many people are doing that, unfortunately, and it's changing that cadence, that voice, that humor, that, lift that we get from a person, because it becomes very robotic and methodical, where it's like, wait, did you really send me that email? I can't, and that's the other thing, I can't tell you how many times on like LinkedIn, people are using these, they're automating, using the automations to send people email, sort of like these solicitations. And I'm like, how many times I'm like, yeah, Bob, I just saw you yesterday and we talked. Like, this email, clearly I can tell, is just some sort of email blast that, hey, no thought was taken as, okay, do I have a relationship with these people already? Am I just spamming them? But yeah, we are leveraging technology and efficiency and all this other stuff to a fault, because it's then causing the recipient of that information to start feeling some kind of way, where it's like, oh, I feel less than. I thought I was a friend of yours, but now you're talking to me as if we don't have a relationship, when we do.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's a great segue to your expertise, actually, which is, I'd love to talk a bit. It is. I'd like to talk a bit about what you do in your B.O.O.S.T and that whole branding thing. I'd love to share that with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I had mentioned previously, my husband started the company. We were initially a CRM, customer relationship management shop. And one of the things that our clients to really simply put, CRM is essentially leveraging technology for a sales, marketing, and service perspective to connect with your clients, prospects, et cetera, very effectively. A lot of our clients started approaching us and asking us, hey, with the increase in the use of social media, what is the impact of social CRM, is what they were calling it. And so we started really learning all that we could about the various platforms. And because so many of the clients that we serve are in the business to business space or business to government, most of them were most comfortable with LinkedIn. And so that's where we decided to sort of ebb and shift all of our focus and resources and understanding how LinkedIn could really work to support our clients. And through that process, we developed an internal methodology called the B.O.O.S.T methodology, which essentially we help our clients use LinkedIn to build their brand, to optimize relationships, obtain more leads, secure thought leadership space, and then tap into new markets. So using that same methodology internal in our company resulted in us winning over $500,000 of new consulting revenue in our core area of expertise, which at that time was CRM, just through LinkedIn in about a 2-year period. And so as we started sharing some of these methodologies with our clients, they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I need you to train our sales team or our BD guys or our C-suite leaders to really be able to integrate this methodology into our business process. And so fast forward to today, over the last 6 or so years, I've personally trained more than 7,000 business professionals on this methodology. And these clients range from job seekers, small business owners, entrepreneurs, all the way up to large government agencies like the National Institutes of Health, National Cancer Institute, et cetera. So, it's a lot of fun because, as I mentioned previously, people are my passion. And it gives me just a tremendous amount of joy to take a person's profile or an organization's profile that's really flat or doesn't effectively articulate their value, or it's what we call, it's not alive, which is we love acronyms. So alive, which essentially helps our clients to make sure that their profiles are accurate, locatable, impactful, value-based, and engaging. So really helping these profiles to come alive and just see how the lift in the business, how, this boost gives them and better positions them for business success. Not only just in LinkedIn, but because we take a holistic approach, it really helps fuel their business development and branding, their entire organizational strategy. It just takes it to a new level.
That's awesome. Because I find, and I'm guilty of this, my LinkedIn profile is not what it should be. And I hate the word should, because that's one of my pet peeves, is we should ourselves to death.
Yes.
But it's LinkedIn, I find sometimes people look at it as kind of a stagnant social media tool compared to Instagram and Facebook and all the ones that move really quickly. Yeah. What's your feedback on that kind of? How do you unstagnate LinkedIn, I guess is the question.
I think the stagnation comes from the idea, and when you think about it, because your profile is such a large part of your LinkedIn presence, it can feel stagnant, because the idea is you shouldn't necessarily be changing your profile every day or every week for that matter. You kind of set it and forget it, but it's such a big part of your identity on that social media platform. Now you have a similar identity on, your Instagrams and your Facebook and Twitter and all that, but it's such a small piece of who you are in the grand scheme of that platform that it doesn't feel stagnant. But the way that you get beyond the stagnation of LinkedIn is the engagement piece. Is your profile, are you engaging? And so it's making sure that you're sharing posts and articles, and you're commenting and liking and engaging, and you're in groups and you're starting groups if that's appropriate, that you're building your network, that you're having conversation like you and I are having right now with people in your network, as opposed to just blindly accepting requests to connect or making requests to connect and thinking that that's the be all end all just because you're trying to amass a certain number of connections. And so I think that's how you get beyond the stagnation, is really looking at the engagement element and really almost thinking of LinkedIn from the perspective of it's this giant boardroom where we've all been in meetings where you're at a boardroom table. You've got some people that are just seat takers. They've got a seat at the table, and that's important to have a seat at the table.
Right.
But what's more important is that you've got a seat and that people know that you're there, that you're showing authenticity, that you're sharing information, you're sharing your thought leadership, you're commenting back to the people that are sharing their thought leadership. So you're participating in that community. So I think that's how you move beyond it.
I was going to say it's similar processes to doing it on Facebook or Instagram. It's just that LinkedIn doesn't tend to open up to that in the same way. And I do know several people who have done amazing business on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's on my to-do list, so I'm guilty of that, which is why I love having you on this show, updating my profile. What would you offer as a first suggestion? So if somebody's kind of on LinkedIn but hasn't even touched their profile in eons, what would be the first step to try and boost your presence on LinkedIn?
I would say focus above what we call above the fold. So for those people who are familiar with creating websites and this whole notion of above the fold, so focusing on those elements of your profile that a person's going to see as soon as they land on your profile. Because if you think of your profile like a newspaper, we only have like 5 to 7 seconds to capture someone's attention. Chances are the things that are going to capture someone's attention are going to be the visual elements on your profile, as well as the impactful statements that you make on your profile. So first and foremost, making sure that that graphic banner across the top of your profile is one that's going to be engaging, that's going to cause someone to be compelled enough to either connect your industry with who you are, or maybe it's branding elements of your company, or maybe it's a call to action, or if you look at mine, it's got my other digital handles, because not everybody loves LinkedIn. Maybe Instagram is their thing, and so I want them to know, hey, I'm there too, so connect with me there. Having a strong headshot, making sure that it's visually, aesthetically, appealing and attractive, and then making sure that your headline is really strong, the space directly under your name. So not just having, CEO of ABC company, which is useful to know, but it's really not compelling enough for me to say, hey, I want to read the rest of this person's profile. So making sure it contains those keywords that a person might be using in order to identify your expertise in a search. But then beyond that, what's that value statement? So why would I hire or do business with you? Why would I connect with you based on what's in that value statement? So making sure that you're just thoughtfully populating that space above the fold so that it then causes someone to be drawn into your profile is what I would say to focus on first.
Excellent. I'm going to have to go look at your profile after this. I looked at your website, was really curious with that. Didn't get as far as your LinkedIn profile, so I'll have to go look at that. How often, we kind of know how often we're supposed to be active on Facebook and Instagram. How often does someone need to be active on LinkedIn?
So you brought up a point earlier that I want to make sure that I mention more about, is the fact that the LinkedIn community has a totally different appetite for the frequency of communication. Like Twitter, what do they say? 20 to 30 times a day you should be tweeting. And that's cool. Well, not so cool in LinkedIn, because if you've got that kind of time on your hand to communicate, then people are wondering, okay, are you really working? Like, how do you have all this time? I want to know your secret sauce. And so in terms of, I think relevance is really important. So you need to make sure that however frequently you communicate, the relevance of the information is such that it is worthy of people's attention. But I would say at a minimum, maybe once a day, some sort of posting some original content. So whether it's you're sharing an interesting industry article that you might think is relevant to the community that you're building or serving or trying to connect with, or maybe it's an event, maybe it's a resource, maybe it's, your podcast, something that you believe is going to be relevant to that community. So once a day, I think is a great place and manageable place to start. But then also sprinkling in there opportunities for you to like and comment and share content that that folks in your network might be engaging in as well, because then that's going to show that you are paying attention to what's going on with the folks in your network.
Okay. One question that comes to mind for me from past learning of LinkedIn was that there was a time where you couldn't duplicate things. Like if you wrote a blog post, you couldn't really recoup and duplicate it in LinkedIn. Otherwise, Google wouldn't like you or things like that. Is that still true? or is that something you have to watch out for?
Well, I think so much of that you still need to watch out too, because I mean, we never know what's going on in the background.
It changes every day anyway.
Exactly. So I think that's still really important. But I think, again, so much of it goes back to the relevance of the information. And I think based on the feedback that you get from people, if people find that, oh my gosh, this was an amazing post, to me, you repurpose it and you share it with other people. You're simply just trying to be a resource. So I think so much of what you do is going to need to go back to, well, what's your strategy? Why? What's your motivation for sharing this information? And so as long as why or your motivation matches up with, you actually doing whatever that behavior might be, then I say, like, go for it. Even if it does mean that, okay, yeah, it's going to knock me down in the Google world, but it's like, okay, I've got to remain true to my authentic self, which is to serve and inform people as well.
Right. And that's good advice, because to me, creating content is part of what we do, but using our content wisely and not rewriting 20 pieces of content and using one piece of content wisely is important, right? So whether you start with a podcast as being your prime content, or blogging is your prime content, or something is sharing it in a wise way across platforms.
And I think so many people that we serve learn differently, right? So some people want to listen to a podcast. Some people want to read a blog. Some people want to see a video. And so it's you're serving whatever the love language or the communication style of that audience that you're working with and supporting.
Absolutely. That's wonderful advice. Thank you very much. Where can people learn more about you? If they want to know more about, from a small business perspective, if they want to know more about you and what you offer and understanding B.O.O.S.T and LinkedIn, where can they do that? So
the easiest way would be to go to our website. And so that's kellytleonard.com. So kellytleonard.com. An alternative way would be to go to boostmylinkedin.com. Okay. And certainly they can find me on LinkedIn as well. My LinkedIn URL is KT Leonard on LinkedIn. And so would love to connect with folks there. Just make sure you send a personal message. Let me know that you heard me with Heather on her podcast, just so that I know the context by which you're reaching out, so that I can expedite your request to connect.
Excellent. And I will be doing that when I get off the show. It's because LinkedIn's something I had been doing work on, and then I kind of, I stopped. I actually gave some of the stuff that you did about people enhancing their profile. I did a free workshop about 4 or 5 years ago, and I never really went back myself because life happened and LinkedIn kind of got parked. And I always want to bring it back in, but I'm never quite sure the best way to do it. So that's really good advice on how to start doing LinkedIn and doing that.
Awesome.
So thank you. We're coming to the end. I always wrap up with 3 questions, and one is, what is your superpower?
Connector. I'm a connector.
Connector, okay. I always love finding what women have different superpowers. It's great. Do you have a favorite quote, and how does it apply to you?
Wow. Favorite quote. Oh, what is my favorite quote? You know, Marianne Williamson has a quote, super duper long quote, and it's not in my office, and it's not really a quote, it's a poem. But she talks about, who am I? And so it's the fact that, let your light shine, essentially. So, you're beautiful, you're bold, you're brilliant, and so let your light shine in all that you do.
What's the most important message you'd like to leave our listeners as a takeaway?
Oh my goodness. Embrace the authentic you. Yeah, just do you. Don't worry about what's going on around you. Stay focused, stay committed. Do you would be my guidance to folks.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. It's been wonderful.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for all you do to support women entrepreneurs.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Ready for More podcast. You can find today's show notes and links at www.igniteyourmarket.com/readyformore. My name is Heather Cameron. I'm your podcast host. And when I'm not hosting this podcast, I'm busy working with entrepreneurial women like you who are ready for more in their business and are looking to get focused on their own unique path to success. You can find more about myself and my programs at www.igniteyourmarket.com. If you like what you heard, feel free to rate, review, and share with your friends. And don't miss an episode by subscribing. Until next time, remember, now is the best time to focus on your more and be inspired by your own unique gifts.